was
restarting.
Gonna say, did you click record?
Yeah, and I almost forgot, and then yes. So after hearing that Paris is interested in marrying Juliet, and after Capulet saying, "Oh, let's wait," Capulet kind of has a compromise. He says, "I'm gonna have a party tonight. And at this party, I want you to look at all the ladies there, examine all the beauties. And if after you examine all the beauties and you think that my daughter is still the best and someone you want to be with, great. Of course, my consent is only part of it. She needs to also agree, and she needs to also like you." And it's interesting because right now, it's like, "Aw, you're such a good dad. That's so sweet that you're like not rushing her into things." And you're like, "Well, she should equally, be a part of this." We'll see how that changes, right, as we go on. And so that party that he's having, he sends his servant to go invite everyone. And the servant can't read. So he gets this list of people that he needs to invite to a party, and the servant's like, "Oh shoot, I don't know how to read." So he's walking around, and the reason I'm reading this instead of watching it is because the film doesn't address it. So I wanted to clarify how Romeo ended up at a party that he wasn't supposed to be at. You guys can sit on that too. It's comfy, so the blanket. And so the interesting thing is that Romeo was never meant to show up at this party. He's a Montague. Montagues aren't allowed at Capulet parties, but the serving man can't read. So he goes to Romeo. "Can you help me read this invitation?" And so Romeo says, serving man's like, "Good evening. I pray you, sir, can you read? I, mine own fortune in my misery." And the serving man is like, "Perhaps you have learned it without book." Like, "Oh yeah, sounds like you know misery without needing a book. Sounds like you're an expert. But I pray, can you read anything you see?" And Romeo says, "I, if I know the letters and the language." And he's kind of just messing with the serving man. So the serving man thinks like, "You can't read." So he's like, "Oh, you say honestly, rest you merry, bye." And Romeo says, "Stay, fellow, stay, I can read." And he reads the letter, and he says, "Signor Martino and his wife and daughters, County Aisling and his beauteous sisters, the lady widow of Vitruvio, Signor Placentio, his lovely nieces, Mercutio, his brother Valentine, mine uncle Capulet, his wife and daughters, my fair niece Rosaline and Livia, Signor Valentino and his cousin Tybalt, Lucio and the lively Helena. A fair assembly. Whither shall they come?" So he just read a list of all these people. He's like, "Oh, it's pretty good looking group of people right there. Where are they going?" And the serving man says, "Up." "Whither? To supper?" "To our house." "Whose house?" "My master's." "Indeed, I should have asked that thee before." "Well, now I'll tell you without asking. My master is the great rich Capulet. And if you be not of the house of Montagues, I pray, come and crush a cup of wine. Rest you merry." And so he said, "You can come as long as you're not" what? "Of the house of Montague." So as long as you're not of the house of Montagues, come party with us. But Romeo, he is a Montague, right? So Montagues are the opposite of the Capulets. They would never show up at a party together. They're sworn enemies. It would be like, having the Bloods and the Crips, or, two rival gangs together. So Romeo, though, he sees all these people on the list. He notices that some of these people he knows, like Rosaline. Rosaline is the girl that he was pining over earlier on. She's going to be at the party? And so Benvolio notices this too, and he says, "Oh, at that same ancient feast of Capulets sups the fair Rosaline. Rosaline's going to be there. With all, sups the fair Rosaline, with whom thou loves. With all the admired beauties of Verona, go thither, and with unattained eye compare her face with some that I shall show, and I will make thee think thy swan a crow." So he's saying, go to the party, and what does he want Romeo to do? Compare her face with some that I shall show. So I'm going to show you some pretty faces. You're going to compare those faces to Rosaline. And Benvolio says by the end of it, that girl you thought was a swan is going to look like a crow. She's going to be hurt AF after I'm done with you tonight. Like you're going to meet all these beautiful ladies of Verona. So that's Benvolio's goal is, perfect timing. I can get you over this girl. Watch, we're going to go to that party. You're going to see her compared to all the other girls, and you're going to be like, oh, wait, she's not that special. So Romeo takes very much offense at that. Oh, when the devout religion of mine I maintain such falsehood, then turn tears to fire. And those who often drowned could never die. Transparent heretics be burnt for liars. One fairer than my love, ha! The all-seeing sun never saw her match since the first world begun. So, Benvolio's like, oh, let's go to the party. We're going to compare her. You're going to see there's lots of beautiful women. And he's like, ha! If my religion of my eyes, if my eyesight maintains such falsehood, lies to me like that, then, you know what? My eyes deserve to be burnt out in their sockets. One fairer than my love? Huh. Right? The all-seeing sun never saw her match since the first world begun. No one could compare to her, right? And I love that metaphor. And those who often drowned could never die. Transparent heretics be burnt for liars, right? Eyes are constantly wet, right? So your eyes are constantly drowning, but they never die, right? So he's like, if my eyes deceive me and I see someone who I think is attractive, I will burn my eyes out because they're transparent heretics, liars. No one is more beautiful than my love. And Benvolio's like, tut, you saw her fair, none else being by, herself poised with herself in either eye. But in that crystal scales, let there be weighed your lady's love against some other maid that I will show you shining at this feast. And she shall scant show well that now seems best. Oh, the last line, he pronounces it best, right? But in that crystal scales, let there be weighed your lady's love against some other maid that I will show you shining at this fest. And she shall scant show well that now seems best. Compared to other girls, she's not going to look special at all. And Romeo says, I'll go along, no such sight to be shown, but to rejoice in splendor of mine own. Like, I'll go, but not to look for other girls, but to rejoice in the splendor that is her. Again, same with Capulet. Like, he sings one tune now, he'll be singing another tune soon. And so then 1.3 is the scene that you guys watched where Lady Capulet and the nurse are talking about Paris. I did just want to point out the line that started on page 39. Lady Capulet comes in, page 39, line 68, and she's here to talk to Juliet, but the nurse is like going on, right? And the nurse says like, oh, I might be lucky enough to see you married one day. And Lady Capulet's like, Mary. Oh, Mary? That Mary is the very theme I came to talk of. Tell me, daughter Juliet, how stands your disposition to be married? And Juliet's, it's an honor I dream not of. An honor, said the nurse. Why, were I not thine only nurse, I would say thou hadst sucked wisdom from thy teat. Oh, and this is like a funny story, right? So the reason she's called the nurse is because she literally nursed Juliet. They were called wet nurses. Have you guys heard of wet nurses? So back in the day,
like the nannies.
Nannies, but they would breastfeed the other lady's baby because the other lady didn't want to be bothered, like the rich, to be able to nurse a child, you have to takes a lot of time, very hard, messy, difficult. And also you can't travel, you can't drink, you can't do these things that Lady Capulet, she's rich, so she wants to be able to do all those things, right? So what do? You hire, even better than a nanny, you hire a wet nurse. This is someone who's had a child at relatively the same time you have. So she's able to feed the child, and your body can adapt. It can make enough, milk for the children that require it. But of course, it takes a toll on your own physique, right? Your nutrients and stuff. After I fed my second baby, my hair was literally falling out. Like it takes all the nutrients from your body and gives it all to the baby, and it can be very depleting and draining. And of course, if you're paid to nurse one baby, of course your own child might be neglected. And that's kind of what I think happened here, because the nurse says earlier that she had a child who was the same age as Juliet, but that she's with God now and that she wasn't good enough for this earth. And you don't have to turn to it, but I'll just read it on page 35, line 20. The nurse, she died, exactly. So the nurse was breastfeeding 2 children and one of them died, and now she has one child to essentially raise that is sort of maybe taking the place of her own daughter, right? And it's really sad. She says when Lady Capulet says, you're 14 now, right? or no, you're about to be 14. And the nurse says, I know she's about to be 14. Even or odd, of all the days in the year, come Lammas Eve at night shall she be 14. Susan and she, God rest all Christian souls, were of an age. Well, Susan is with God. She was too good for me. So that's like the little line that we hear that like it kind of explains. And I feel like it gives a little bit more like of a morbid sense of understanding of why the nurse is so loyal to Juliet and why she cares so much about her and why she's so like excited. You saw in the video, she's like very enthusiastic. She's almost like a grandma, like, oh, you're so cute, I love you so much. But it's really because she, you know, is raising Juliet and not her own daughter. And she talks about, you know, breastfeeding her and weaning her, but it kind of goes on and on. So the reason I bring that up is because when Juliet is like asked about marriage on page 39, and she says, it's an honor that I dream not of. And the nurse is like, an honor? Why not thine only nurse? I would say thou hast sucked wisdom from thy teeth. She's like, if I wasn't the one who nursed you, I would say you drank some milk that made you smart, girl, right? Which is just like funny, right? So like Shakespeare, he's silly. Like it's not serious. It's all, you know, we have nurses talking about, you know, breasts, and it's silly, right? It's Shakespeare. It's not to be taken seriously. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't understand when they go into this. It's not like, oh, super serious. No, like we're joking around, right? Wordplay, all that stuff. And so Lady Capulet says, well, if you haven't thought of marriage, well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem are already made mothers. By my count, I was your mother much upon these years, that you are now a maid. Thus, in brief, the valiant Paris seeks you for his love. A man, young lady! Lady, such a man is all the world! Why, he's a man of wax! Verona's summer hath not such a flower. Nay, he's a flower. In faith, a very flower. So, like, Lady Capulet, you can tell she's very proper, and the nurse is like, oh, you know, and but they're both, like, excited. They're like, oh, he wants to marry you? Paris? Oh, my gosh. He's rich. He's wealthy. He's powerful. The world has not seen such a beautiful face. And so Lady Capulet wants to know what Juliet thinks. She says, what say you? Can you love the gentleman? This night you shall behold him at our feast. Read over the volume of young Paris's face, and find delight writ there with beauty's pen. Examine every married lineament, and see how one another lends content, and what obscured in this fair volume lies, find written in the margin of his eyes. This precious book of love, this unbound lover, to beautify him, only lacks a cover. The fish lives in the sea, and 'tis much pride, for fair without the fair within to hide. That book in many eyes doth share the glory that in gold clasps locks in the golden story. So shall you share all he doth possess, by having him, making yourself no less. So she's going on about how beautiful he is, how she wants you to go to the party and look at what you see and what you don't see, and how well he's dressed and how well he presents himself. Look in his eyes, right? If you can't see it there, look in his eyes and see the type of person he is. And if you can't see it in his eyes, he's rich, just so you know. And so shall you share all he doth possess, by having him, making yourself no less. So she's like, and by the way, everything he has, you'll have to, right? And that will be beneficial to you. Here, can I borrow Gael's book? Because Neso, do you want to follow? You're the type of person you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that sometimes you do like to follow along, so I don't want to take, because he's not even using his.
It's fine.
Okay. Hopefully my performance is substantial enough. And you know, back then, remember, Shakespeare was all performed and heard. That's why he said, let's go hear a play instead of see a play, because it was about the listening of it. So she's like, you know, and by the way, if you marry him, money, right? And they're already powerful, and so they just want to be more rich and powerful. It's kind of funny how the rich just want to be richer, right? It's like, they're never satisfied. They're not. So Capulet, he's like, let's wait a little bit. She's a little young. Lady Capulet's like, nope, he's rich, he's cute, he wants you, great, let's do it, right? So it's interesting how those two collide. And earlier on, Capulet had said to Paris, Paris was like, earlier than she, our mother's maid. Like, I know ladies in Verona are younger than her who have babies. And Capulet says, and those so soon, and those so soon marred are often made. I'm saying it wrong. Well, yes, question, yes.
Were there divorces back then?
That is a great question. No, they just killed the lady. No, I'm just kidding. No, there really wasn't divorces.
And a lot of people, they don't really love each other back then.
Exactly. It was a marriage of convenience. Yeah, and also it was kind of gross, but like
still happens like with like a lot of Indian parents. They just
Yes.
like arranged marriages.
Yes.
They see each other, but they in like one time, and then they don't see each other until like their wedding.
Yeah, in some of the more like rural areas, I think I know that my partner on YouTube, his family is not like that, but they're in like a really they're in New Delhi, so it's like
yeah,
very.
I know, like my friend's parents,
but like
mom's
other
friends' parents, or like my friend's parents.
Did they not meet until
they are arranged marriage? Like one's like, but they're like, she's like really young.
Oh, she's young. I thought you were saying like that they're like
40 something, but she has like an 18-year-old.
Wow.
19-year-old.
Isn't that interesting how? And so it really does show that, especially in places where it is important, you know, where children are maybe not as expensive. Like here, you have one child and you're thinking like, oh, I need to send them to college and it's going to be this and this and that. But we have to remember that back then it was like you had a child, you were like doing your job to populate the earth. Whereas now we're like one and done, like, oh, it's too hard, I'm just going to have one. I have two and I'm like done. But back then it would be expected like, oh, Juliet, you hit puberty. Okay. When you get married, honey, you're gonna be a spinster by the age of 14. Right? So that idea that you're not married, you don't have kids, really, what's the point? And so obviously Juliet is so young that she doesn't really understand the complexities of that. She's just like, oh, Mom, you want me to meet a guy? Okay, whatever you say. And it's interesting what she says here. Lady Capulet says, speak briefly. Can you like of Paris's love? And she says, she's perfect little Juliet right now, right? So innocent. It's funny how things change when you meet a guy, right? I'll look to like, if looking like move, but no more deep will I in dart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. Yeah, I'll look, but like I won't do anything without your consent, Mom. Ha! Not so true. Come act 2.2. Like that's the opposite of what she does. But again, things change, loyalties change, and our allegiances change very quickly. Same with how Capulet's like, oh no, she's too young to get married. That's gonna change. Juliet, oh, I'll do anything you say, Mom. Just like, I will not look at anyone that you don't approve of. Ha! Not gonna happen. So that was that's 1.3. 1.4 is Romeo and Benvolio and a new character, Mercutio, which you'll see on film next class. Mercutio, he's super smart, but he's also kind of crazy, like as most brilliant people are, right? And he loves attention. He loves to be seen and heard. So not gonna lie, Act 1, Scene 4 is full of a lot of Mercutio's like ranting. And if we were like high-level Shakespeare scholars, we could look at what all the deep metaphors are and talk about how, you know, what Queen Mab represents. But we're not gonna do that because there's only so much that we can fit into the last quarter. So Act 1.4 is basically pre-partying, right? They're drinking, having fun, hanging out. They're skipping the dinner at the Capulet party because who needs dinner? They're there to party. Oh, and how convenient, the party is a masquerade party. So everyone's going to be wearing masks.
It's supposed to be like in the 1800s.
Yes, exactly. And it's still, yeah, and like back then it was like, I feel like today the internet's made like parties like that a lot less like popular. But yeah, you would dress up and it would be like you wouldn't know who you were dancing with, you know, like
that'd be kind of cool.
It'd be cool, right? Especially if you could.
Well, how do you not know like by their hair though?
It's a good point. I mean,
like,
the way the masks are, you should still kind of be able to tell who it is, right?
Yeah,
like
if people
but they're in costume sometimes.
I'll still know. I'm very good with it.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when when you start talking to them. But that's the draw of this for Romeo is that he can go to a Capulet party and not really be seen by the Capulets because obviously he's a Montague. And remember what the serving man said: if you be not of the house of Montague, come crush a cup of wine. So they're just pre-partying, and we meet Mercutio. He's really smart, but he kind of goes on and on. He's really dramatic, and he's extra, you know. And then we are going to skip to page, I don't have my schedule with me. I think it was like 112. Yes, okay, perfect. That's fun. Okay, so page 49, which if you are wanting to follow along, that's fine. Starting at around line 105. Wait, was there something else I wanted to look at too? Hold on, I think there was one before that. Sorry, I have my schedule, but I left it with my book on my desk. Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, going back actually to page 43, Romeo has this really great wordplay that I just wanted to show you guys, because I just think it's so clever and just an example of just like how clever Shakespeare is. Mercutio is like, oh yeah, we're pre-partying, yeah, like, yo, let's get lit, it's gonna be so much fun. And Romeo, he's like, you know, kind of a downer. He's like, oh no, I'm just there to see Rosalind. Maybe she'll like me today. And so he's like, give me a torch. I'm not for this ambling. Being but heavy, I will bear the light. So he's like, I'm so dark that my darkness is making everything else dark. Someone give me a light. Is he dramatic or what, right? And then Mercutio says, nay, gentle Romeo, we must have you dance. Romeo says, not I, believe me. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead, so stakes me to the ground I cannot move. Don't you love how he says that? You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. Your soles are nimble, right? You can like be nimble.
They're hard to understand sometimes, or like you think how they talk.
I know, and it really makes it like backwards, right? Because they flip it around, kind of like Yoda, right?
That, yeah.
like a really intellectual Yoda, right? It is confusing, and that's why sometimes it's so beneficial to, even after like we've read it, to like go home and just kind of review it and just kind of let your eyes gloss over it. But it is sort of backwards sometimes. So not I, believe me, you have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I, and then he goes from soles of your shoe to your soul. You have nimble soles. I have a soul of lead. So heavy that the lead stakes me to the ground. So, I mean, obviously we can't break down every single one of his beautiful pieces of figurative language, but it's just interesting to notice how he uses, you know, souls, and then he connects it back to the souls at the end because his soul of lead stakes him through his feet to the ground. And so it's just an idea of just like how beautiful Shakespearean language is, and how depressed Romeo is. So, then Romeo goes on and on about how depressed he is and how difficult life is, and then Mercutio gives him some advice about dreams, and then at the very end, Benvolio is like, okay, enough chit-chat, enough talking. Page 49, line 111. This wind you talk of blows us from ourselves. Supper is done. We shall come up too late. Hey, we're late for the party. Let's go. And Romeo says, and this is some foreshadowing, I fear too early, for my mind misgives some consequence, yet hanging in the stars shall bitterly begin this fearful date with this night's revels, and expire the term of a despised life closed in my breast by some vile forfeit of untimely death. But he that hath the steerage of my course, direct my sail. On, lusty gentlemen. So he's like, I don't feel good about this. I feel like something bad's gonna happen. I feel like there's gonna be some consequence that's hanging in the stars that's gonna start tonight, shall bitterly begin his fearful date with this night's revels. Oh, I get goosebumps because, like, I mean, he's predicting everything that's going to happen, and even though these are fake people, like, you feel for them, and also really shows intuition is a good thing, is an important thing. The night I broke my foot really bad and had to have lots of surgeries on it as a teenager, that night my mom was like, I don't want you to go hang out with your friend. I'm worried something's gonna happen. And lo and behold, it did. So Romeo's like, I don't feel good about this, but let's go, right? Just, you know, being a teenager, right? Same with when I was. 11:29, we're done at 35. Okay, good. Actually, this is good. So then Act 1, Scene 5, takes us to the party, and we're gonna watch this, so you're gonna get a lot more of the visualness of it, but I just sort of wanted to point out this one scene on page 53, and we're gonna go back to this, so don't worry if you can't follow along right now. But on line 49, Romeo, he comes into the party, Capulets, he's all Capulet, the host, he's all like drunk already. He's like, oh ladies, welcome, oh gentlemen, welcome. Oh, I remember when I was your age, I would talk to a lady, whisper things in her ear. Oh ladies, come dance with me, right? So he's just kind of being a host and hostess with the mostest. And then Romeo is, you know, he has his mask on and he sees Juliet across the room, and Juliet is meeting Paris, you know, probably getting her hand kissed or something like that. They're just being introduced, and Romeo Remember, he was just completely sprung off of Rosalind, right? Completely, burn my eyes out if I ever see someone as beautiful as her, even close. He sees her. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, as rich as a jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady over her fellows shows. The measure is done. I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty until this night. Wasn't he just saying that like a couple hours ago? I've never seen true beauty before. Rosalind is it. She's the end-all be-all. Now he sees Juliet. She's the beautiful one. I didn't even know what love is until I saw her. Oh, she teaches the torches to how to burn. And so Tybalt hears him talking, right? And hears, Romeo probably talking to himself, basically, right? I think he actually asked, he asked the serving man. He said, what lady is that yonder? What lady is that which doth enrich the hand of yonder knight? Like, who's that girl over there? And the serving man says, I do not know. And when Romeo is asking that, Tybalt hears his voice. Remember, Tybalt is the one who was fighting with Benvolio. He's the hot-headed one. And he said, this by his voice should be a Montague. Oh, fetch me my rapier, boy. What dares the slave come hither, covered with an antic face, to spleer and scorn at our solemnity? Now, by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead, I hold it not a sin. Right? Oh, give me my sword. This guy shows up at my party. Oh, it won't be a sin to kill him, because he's on my property. And then Capulet overhears Tybalt being all hot-headed. And he said, what? How now, kinsman? Wherefore you storm so? What are you getting off to? This is a party. Have fun. And Tybalt said, uncle, this is a Montague, our foe. A villain that is hither come in spite to scorn at our solemnity this night. And Capulet looks, young Romeo, is it? Tybalt says, 'tis he, that villain, Romeo. Now remember, the Montagues and the Capulets, it's their younger people fighting. The old people, they don't so much care. They're just obviously going to defend when necessary. But he's like, oh, Romeo, I've heard of him. He's not a problem. He's not like you. You're not, so hot-headed. And so Capulet says, content thee, let him alone. He bears him like a portly gentleman. And to say truth, Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. I would not for the wealth of all this town here in my house do him disparagement. Therefore, be patient. Take no note of him. It is my will, the which, if thou respect, shall show a fair presence, and put off these frowns, an ill-beseeming semblance for a feast. Don't frown, it's not good for this party. If you respect me, you'll walk away and, not think of this. And Tybalt, he disagrees. He says, my frown, it fits when such a villain is a guest. I'll not endure him. And Capulet, and I'll end on this. Oh, what? He shall be endured. What good man boy, I say he shall. Go to. Am I the master here, or you? Go to. You'll not endure him. Ha! God shall mend my soul. You'll make a mutiny among my guests. You'll set a cock-a-hoop. You'll be the man. And then Tybalt was like, it's a shame. He said, no, go to. You are a saucy boy, is it so indeed? I'll make you quiet, go to. And that's where we'll end. And that we'll watch the rest. Okay, so you guys did great. You can start. Welcome back to the classroom. I'll turn